Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Warning brought to you by the Westside Gazette. Uh, I'm your host, Perry Busby, and I'm going to be flying solo this week. My co host, Mr. Bobby Henry, the publisher of the Westside Gazette, could not be with us because he's traveling. But we do want to take time to again say thank you to the West Side Gazette for allowing us this time, to the Henry family, the president, Mr. Levi Henry, who uh, started the West Side Gazette in 1971. This past Sunday, we celebrated 50 years in in business and reporting and being a voice for the community and to the community. And it was a great time, a lot of history, a lot of uh, tissues and tears. It was a good time of celebration and remembering. And so I look forward to seeing Mr. Henry next week. But tonight, uh, as I said, I'm going to be flying a little solo, but I've got some guests, and we're going to have uh, a very candid conversation. One that I look forward to just being an a father and someone who's been in the community for a while to just listen to some young, fresh voices. And I've got some young, fresh voices from here in Broward, as well as from my hometown in Beaumont, Texas. Uh, Two cities who I care about, and two cities who are on the cusp of going through changes. So I definitely look forward to the conversation tonight. But before I begin, right now, about 5 blocks from the offices of the West Side Gazette, there is a um, the African American Research Library and Cultural Center here in Broward is putting on a play entitled "Let the Good Times Roll." Uh, it is the story of Esther Roll, who is a Broward native. Esther grew up in Pompano Beach. And so, for those of you who can now make the connection of Florida and why it was so significant, and the uh, history behind that name, not just in the show, but what it meant to her life, is now put into a production. It was written by Mr. Darius Daltrey and Sriracha Peterson and Monique Williams. Darius was here on 2 Minute Warning last year. He's a gifted poet, spoken word, uh, musician, just a great artist. But they wrote this play, and it's directed by another local talent, Mr. Keith Wade. And this is put on, as I said, by the African American Research Library, the Friends of Arlick, and this is all under the direction of Makiba Foster, the regional director. And Makiba brings a lot to Arlick, to this area. She's a great historian and curator of our history. And this play was originally supposed to take place last year in October, but because of COVID and other concerns, they weren't able to do it. But the intent was to produce the play in honor of her 100th birthday, uh, which again was last year. And so they finally had a chance to put it to production. And so if you're in Broward or in the South Florida area, I encourage you to come down. The show is Drive Up. It's an outdoor show. You can literally just drive up and like you're at the drive-in theater and watch the play. It's a outdoor stage. The play begins tonight, runs through Sunday, begins at 7 each night, Friday, Saturday. Well, tonight, Friday, and Saturday. And then on Sunday, it's at 4 o'clock. And so if you're there, I really encourage you to get out, learn the history of this marvelous uh, South Florida native, and just the tenacity and the growth and her desire to do uh, not just become an actress, but to do for her community. I think you'll learn quite a bit. And there's also an Esther Roll collection within the library. So if you have the chance sometime and you want to go by, you can uh, go see that collection. So again, thanks for that. And we're going to get started. As I said, I'm looking forward to tonight because it's always good to hear young voices because you get a chance to get some new perspective. And I've got some great young men and ladies. I attempted to have a female guest, but my two selections were not available, and so I didn't want this to be an all-male show. It turned out that way, but we're going to have an all-female show so we can have another side of this discussion. And so we're going to can't say we're going to do it next week, but we're going to do it in Women's History Month for sure. My first guest is Ramon Robinson. Ramon was one of the first young men I met when I moved here. Little did I know he had such a, a, a talented background. Ramon started as a rapper. He's a Billboard nominated rapper, so it was not just one of those corner rappers. He was the real deal. Uh, but he decided that he wanted to do more for his community, and so I want to bring Ramon Robinson on, as well as his partner, Mr. Brandon Freeny. I met Brandon through Ramon, and man, these two guys are, as I say, they are really remarkable young men. Uh, they've they are the co-founders of Positivity Pays, and I got my Positivity Pays shirt on in honor of the occasion.
Yes, sir.
And I will let them explain their business because they do. It's not just business; it's community service.
Yes.
And what they've done for this community is really remarkable. What they've done in the lives of the young uh, children in this community is really remarkable. And so we'll begin to talk about that later. My third guest is from Beaumont, Texas. Uh, Young man who I've known for the longest. He's a veteran and spent several duties uh, in missions, but he came back to Beaumont and came back with a different perspective. After giving his life for his country, he realized that he needed to really do more for his city. And he has been one of those voices that has been an agitator. And I want to introduce Mr. Chris Onk Jones. How you doing, Chris? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. It's a
Good.
pleasure
Good
to be
evening. Good evening.
Good evening. We're
here.
gonna get started. Ramon and Brandon.
Yes.
As I said, you guys co-founded Positivity Page. Tell us a little bit about Positivity Page and what it does.
You want to take it?
Sure. I'll take it.
Okay.
So we have a non and for-profit arm of Positivity Pays. I'll take the nonprofit arm and kind of break it down in three components because the focus is on one of the most important things in life, which is being literate. Um, and so we have three components of literacy that we focus on. We focus on basic literacy, which is the ability to obviously read, write, comprehend. Media literacy, being able to evaluate messages in terms of the media and propaganda and all the things we've been dealing with lately. And then that last component we focus on is financial literacy. So we think we can have a whole community if you have a bunch of people that can read and write, a bunch of people that can understand the media messages that are being sent at them and then send out their own media messages. And then if you have the resources and the finances to push those media messages through all those components of literacy, you can have a solid foundation. So that's what our nonprofit organization is trying to push. So Ramon, I don't know if you want to take that.
No, I think you should take this one as well.
That is a heavy lift, but very innovative.
Yeah.
It is very innovative.
Yeah, I think he would be the best to explain the for-profit arm.
but tell me, okay, so did you start with the nonprofit?
We started the other way around. We started
with the profit.
The for-profit.
Okay.
And with the for-profit, it was more about publishing. It was more about Ramon coming out of the space of music into mentoring, teaching, educating, speaking, and all those things, and landed us in certain rooms in certain situations where we just found ourselves with a hunger and desire to not only do this in the classroom, but do it in the streets as well. So it was just one of those things that just kind of happened. So from going from comic books to teaching to creating comic books, to teaching children how to make comic books. And then, those things just kind of just evolved into this whole, we're sitting down with principals and politicians and publishers about the work that we were doing because everything started with positivity.
Right.
And everybody kind of just ate that up. And, we needed a lot of that, especially in the literature, whether it was music, whether it was comic book, whatever it was. Everybody just needed a little bit of it. And so we came with, some great information, some great energy, and just the right spirit. And, and that's what Positivity Pays, kind of evolved into or from, and we're still evolving to this day.
Yeah. But now you mentioned comic books and you just kind of threw that on in there. You just kind of did the comic book. But the comics books is really what started my conversation with Ramon.
Right. So I kind of
so tell us how the comic books about the comic books and how that came.
So I wanted to leave some meat on the bone for the star, and so he kind of threw me to have the conversation. So I wanted to have it backwards so he could kind of talk about the beginning. So I just kind of want to give somewhat of an introduction. He can kind of go ahead and do that. So obviously you see it right there.
Right. So this was the first comic book?
No, that was the second comic book. The first comic book was an anti-bullying comic book, and it was a lyric book as well.
Okay. So who came up with the comic book idea?
Well, everything is like we work together, right? It's just like a team effort. I mean, we've come up with so many ideas. It's kind of hard to say who came up.
Who said what first?
Right.
It's like it's just we work together very well, and so we both did music. We both rap. We both are can produce. We both do all these different things, and we just create so well when we're actually working together, coming up with the ideas, whether it's a comic book or a song, because we're still producing music and still releasing music. And everything just goes through us. Both of us, puts our stamp of approval on it or makes the necessary changes that need to be made to it. But it's really a team effort.
Let me also just add this one caveat in terms of giving the story, some juice to some degree. The first comic book actually stemmed from some legislation that was happening in the state of Florida with Rep. Chevron Jones at the time.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so Ramon, I don't know if you want to kind of piggyback from there, kind of discuss, the key
Yeah,
theme.
definitely.
Yeah.
So this was the first comic book, right? And you see the young man, he's writing and he's going through a situation at school where he's being bullied. We were doing a comic book called American Soldier at the time, and we had this. It was like a lyric slash comic book. It wasn't really a full comic book. It was just based off a song that we did, and we got some support from the local Pepsi distribution plant near us, and so they gave us actually a lot of support for us as an independent, as independent artists and this independent movement, being able to get Pepsi products and then financial support, and it really opened our eyes to being a business. And so that's really where it started. And then we met with Chevron Jones, really good friend, and he really educated us on some things that are happening and writing things, more for the community, just keeping that community in mind when we're creating anything. And after that conversation, because that's something that's always been on my heart too, because so many kids are dealing with it um, in such a negative way. You have a lot of kids that are hurting themselves and hurting others. And so, how do we address this? And so, we thought, it's one way we could do it is one through music, because that's what both of us do, but also through these comic books and giving them images, giving them some kind of hope, some kind of positive energy when they're going through these difficult times. Because when we're going to the schools, we go to the Department of Juvenile Justice, we do a lot of mentoring. People always say, well, where are the parents at? And the sad part is some of these kids don't have parents. We have a very large foster care system. And so some of these kids are not going home to a mom and dad in this loving home, and they're just having trouble. It's so much more difficult than that for them. And so we're looking for ways, well, how do we support these kids that don't have that? And so one of the ways for us to do that is through literature, right? And so we were trying to create stuff that they can take home and they can read and they can feel hopeful for the future. They can feel positive. They can feel like they have some kind of support.
Yeah. Um, and I brought Chris in because Beaumont and Fort Lauderdale are both port cities. Kind of small cities. I mean, of course, Fort Lauderdale is much bigger than Beaumont. Um, but as I've seen both cities um, coming out of COVID, both of our cities are going to be different.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of ways, it's going to take very innovative people and forward thinking people, because if I get so tired of this idea of getting back to normal. We're not ever getting back. We will find a new normal,
Right.
but we won't go back to an old normal.
I agree.
And so, you know, but I do know it's the human capacity to always find that old comfort zone. So, what are some of the ideas that you guys think that needs to take place in order for? I mean, because you guys have a great incubator for bringing young people into an understanding.
I totally
You
agree.
know,
And if I could, fellas, I definitely want to congratulate you and applaud you for tackling some of the main issues that plagues, especially our communities.
Right.
Literacy by itself, is a doozy because, it has its stigmas. And I like how you, with comic books, break that barrier, bring them something other than the norm, and make it relatable. You know what I'm saying? I know an author here in Beaumont, and he had to curtail his writings, especially because he does adult books and he does children books as well. Um, and I told him, I said, you really have to tackle the literacy issue
Right.
that we have within our community, that plagues our community. I said, yeah, we have students that read, but literacy is more than just reading. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? So, um, breaking down what you can read to convey to somebody else, um, and then recite it. A whole bunch of things go into literacy. So I mean, like, I love the way you guys break it down, especially when you top it off with financial literacy, and how you can actually capitalize on everything you've learned from first grade to street.
Right.
So I mean, so it's those components are very important for in my diaspora, and especially within my community here in Beaumont, when it comes to learning and repositioning yourself. So I definitely want to applaud you guys on that. I'll be ordering some comic books, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Absolutely, man.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
But go
go
ahead, big
ahead.
bro.
No, go ahead.
No, but like
Because
I
I want
think
to listen.
one of the ways we're definitely going to be able to, I guess, create a new norm for ourselves, like you said, is to, one, like you said, also be innovative and out of the box thinking. You definitely, um, yeah, progressive is good, but we have to elevate ourselves, because progression eventually will create a rut, and all we're doing is just creating a straight
Yeah,
line.
Right.
yeah,
But elevation, in our endeavors, will definitely give us what we saw in 2020. It would definitely give us you know that block vision on how to focus on literacy issues, focus on financial issues, focus on transportation issues,
Right.
a lot of different things. I think COVID, coronavirus 2020, has created opportunities as well as crushed some of the old ones. So the stage is set, like you said, big bro, for that population, that those innovators, to to really pour themselves out and do some collaborations for some out of the box thinking, as well as getting information from other resources, and network, outside networking. I'm not talking about just networking here in Beaumont, um, but building those bridges. Like I said in today's text message that you got, but bro, you have to build those bridges if you're expecting to go
yeah.
somewhere. So I'm
But piggybacking on that, and you're saying build bridges. With all this tech, I mean, are we effectively building bridges? And I guess that's one of the things that um, I thought in bringing this group together, because you talked about education, Chris, Ramon and Brandon. You've done some innovative things around education. I mean, what are some of the key takeaways, and what was some of the um, obstacles you had to face? Because what you brought was very different than what was being given.
hmm hmm
Right.
And I know that came with, I know it came with, you had plenty of positivity, but you needed that positivity to get over some of the BS along the way.
Right. Right. But I think that's with anything. I think honestly, I think what we're doing right now is a lot easier because of the West Side Gazette, right? So without the West Side Gazette, a lot of our stuff wouldn't be in the newspaper, right? A lot of people would pick it up because it's in the Gazette, it's in the news, and it makes it that that much more interesting to some people after flipping through the newspaper, or that's something that we can add to our resume. So that's a huge piece to what we do is press, right? Any that information getting out there. I think that's a huge one of the biggest things. But the Gazette went through the trouble, right? They since 1971, they've been the ones dealing with these hardships. I don't look at what we're going through now necessarily as a hardship. It's really like we're piggybacking off the work that was done before us. I honestly
Mhm.
don't see. I mean, Brandon may have a different perspective, but I feel like it's been way easier than what you guys have had to go through.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that as people, as individuals that aren't necessarily trained as educators, to meet these kids where they at, where they are rather, has been has made this easier. So, given the fact that children are attracted to music, and especially hip hop music, pop, and R&B, to come into a space having those types of conversations, it made it easier for us to educate them on whatever else we want to talk about. So, if we were to step in the door, just bringing the same old, it would have
Right.
been a lot harder. So, when you talk about creative writing or English or whatever the case may be, but you bring comic books now, and now we're
Right.
teaching the same thing you're learning in the 6th or 7th grade, but now that plot structure looks completely different because now we introduce it with comic book. It just makes it a lot easier because the vehicle in which we're coming at it with, it looks a lot cooler to the children. But we're still trying to teach them the same core values. We want to still give them the same things that they're going to need to use in life and things of that nature. But still, all of that was predicated and built upon based on what Ramon just said in terms of having something like the West Side Gazette to be a credible reference to say these guys should be given an opportunity to walk through the door. And so that's how we got a lot of these opportunities by having individuals, entities like the West Side Gazette, kind of vouch for it.
Right. Yeah. No, one of the things I know that it first struck me with the comic books because the first one I get was the Lewis Latimer.
Oh,
Mm.
Um,
okay. So
yeah.
that's a different type of book. So that one, that the story and why we started creating those books. So that's like a children's
Oh,
book, right?
that's a whole nother. You want to get an origin story there?
Yeah. So I give the origin story to that, but so this was like the brilliance of who Brandon is, right? We all have like our strong suits, but I think of things way different than he does, and he thinks of things way different than I do. And we're what was it? 2 years ago, we're doing Black History Month. We're teaching the kids about voting rights. Brandon comes up with this whole idea. We're gonna create voting booths. We're gonna give the kids voting registration cards, and they got to draw their face on it and put their name on it.
Right.
And so we're having all kinds of conversations with them because this is something they've never done, and it gives them this feeling of almost independence, right? And the kids are loving it, and they're just having a really good time. And so Brandon's
Right.
like, okay, here are your candidates, right? Because now you're able to vote. We got a voter registration. So when you come here and you put your ballot in the ballot box, we did the whole nine. Brandon came up with this whole thing, right? And
Right.
then we got to educate you now on who your candidates are because they're doing all of this just to create a comic book. The person that they vote for, that's who we're going to do the comic book on. So
Wow.
we give them Martin Luther King, we give them Rosa Parks, we give them Malcolm X, we give George Washington Carver, and so Brandon's
Harriet
like,
Tubman.
and Harriet Tubman, and Brandon's like, so do you know who Martin Luther King is? And we're going to start there, and we're going to ask you, what do you know about the candidates already? We're getting questions like Martin Luther King freed the slaves, and we're like, so they know his name, but they don't know
But
who
they don't
Martin
know
Luther
his
King is,
works. Wow.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so they know all of these people by name, but because of the way Black History Month is really taught within the school system, they don't know who the people are. It's just, oh, I heard that
Mm.
name before, and they're just familiar with the name.
Yeah.
And so Brandon and I started talking. We're like, this is a huge problem because this is our community. These are our kids, right? These are our children.
Right.
So how do we change that? How do we begin to educate them um, just completely different from the way they've been educated in the past? And
Hmm.
we came up with, let's write a children's book that gives them, that talks about it just like they're sitting at home with a parent, right? And so in the book, we have a father and he's talking to his son. And so he's just educating his son and they're going back and forth. They're literally just having this conversation. And we wanted it to be like that because a lot of times we'll sit back and you'll remember the conversations that you had with your father, that you've had with your mother, and how they've
Mm.
educated you on things. Some of our kids, like I said, don't get that opportunity.
Right.
So this was an opportunity for us to write a book from that point so they could sit down and have that experience of what's going on within this story. And so we wrote one about Lewis Latimer, and then we did another one, Madam C.J. Walker. But this is like a series we want to do because we've had professors from other states reach out to us, older gentlemen that have never heard of him, and said, this is an amazing book. I didn't know this stuff. I'm a 70-year-old white man. What made you write this? right? And so that's not what we were looking to do. We were looking to affect our kids, but it's amazing because they're like, this is great information. This is not just for children. This is just a great book in general, right? And so that really lit a fire under us both because it's like, wow, if we can have everybody kind of coming under this umbrella of education and really educating each other, we can create something absolutely amazing.
Right. No, I think it's very innovative because it's forward thinking, but it's also definitely deep rooted.
Yes.
And, you know, uh, but when you started this, I mean, were you thinking I'll get it? You want to get into the schools, or was it just something just totally
No,
opposite of that?
it's like you start with one goal in mind, right? And so one of the things I know, I speaking for myself, doing music and understanding the music business, when I make music, I don't make music with the goal of selling it to 1 million people, because in order to do that, you have to have a budget to sell it to 1 million people. So I would have to get the budget first before I can set the goal for something like that. So when I'm thinking of making music, the goal is to complete the song and make the song sound as good as possible. So with a book, the goal is to write the book because it's difficult, right? The goal
Mm-hmm.
then becomes to get an illustrator who can actually illustrate this book and make it come to life. And then the goal is to work with a graphic designer who can actually piece everything together and then publish it. At no point have I been like, oh, I want it in schools, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like Brandon said earlier, a lot of times once we complete it, that's when people are reaching out to us because it's innovative. It's something they haven't seen. We've turned with the nonprofit Urgent Inc. We turned 35 of these young girls into published authors, all under the age of 15, right? So this is not a goal that Brandon or I set out to do. They just said, hey, we want you guys to come in and teach us how we can create a comic book. They then took that, and now they're working on raising money and taking all of these young girls to Paris, right? This is something that is like, oh wow, now we can do this. Now Brandon and I, now we think of it a little different, because now we can say, hey, let's use some of these funds to open bank accounts for these kids. Now that they're published authors, what's next for them, right? But we
Right.
didn't have that in mind when we started. We weren't necessarily looking to turn them into published authors. It was just the goal of how do we educate them.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
now that we have them and we're educating them, and they're actually latching on to what it is that we have, and they want this information, how do we give them that next step and keep them on this path, right? How do we create this consistency with them? So now we're on this thing where we're opening up bank accounts for youth, and we're just, hey, we're using the nonprofit to start that initial account with the credit union and make sure they start to understand these some of the simple goals with with finances. We talked to some of the parents about it as well. We've created a little community of people where we work on the credit with them and teach them some things that they can actually do with their children. But it just keeps morphing into something else because it's something we didn't think of initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But in terms of the adult participation, have you seen an increase in?
Oh yes. Yeah, the adult participation, it's almost more than the students because I didn't see myself as an author. I didn't do like really good in school, and I was like, I want to write a book. I never saw that. I was like, I wanted to rap, and that was cool. And then when I saw what the industry was and what they're feeding people, and the state of mind you have to be in, and how the community gets torn down, and everything that's taken out of our community, all the resources that are stripped, I was like, I don't want no part of that way. But I will do this. I'm just going to do it my way, and I'm not gonna play a part in that. And Brandon and I have that same mentality where it's like, we can't get on with that because it's going to destroy what we have. How do we build from what it is that we see as being positive, as uplifting, as community building? How do we make this work? And sometimes it sounds crazy. Some of these ideas sound far fetched. We're doing trading cards now. It sounds far fetched, and then God's like, I got y'all. Don't even worry about it.
No, And again, you guys have a way of just kind of throwing things out. You said the trading cards. Um,
I make sure I
Chris,
keep some of
Chris,
these
they,
here.
Chris, they've come up.
Man, I
They've come
love
up
it.
with trading cards of people here in the community, people
That's
who've
awesome.
contributed. And again, like I say, it becomes more futuristic, but yet
Man, that's
deeply
very out of
rooted
the
in the
box.
process.
Yes, indeed. That is
But
very, man.
you know, with the trading cards, it's like, and so some of this also is like, you're an author, right? So
Right,
getting to meet you, understand that you worked at NASA, and the information that you have, the things you know how to do, you know, as we're coming up, a lot of times we miss this information, and when we miss this information, we don't get a chance to talk to you. We our futures, we lose out on that for the future. There are some things
right.
that I can't do simply because I have not spoken to that
Right,
person who's going to
right.
inspire me
I
to do
totally
them,
agree. I totally
right?
agree.
I
Yeah.
may now I've never saw myself doing some things because I never saw it happen before. I didn't know it was possible. And then I meet somebody and they say, "Hey, you know, you brothers can do something like this," and that's like how we ended up with the nonprofit. Somebody actually gifted it to us. Love
Wow.
what we were doing
Wow.
so much. He was like, "I'm gonna be honest with you. If you guys will
Wow.
accept this gift, I'll pay for you guys to start a nonprofit. You won't have to worry about anything." And that's how that happened. We didn't. That was not a plan. That's not something that we set out to do. That was never a goal. But when he saw the
Wow.
trading cards and
Hmm.
he said, like, we're putting a timestamp on history. I'm now telling our kids, hey, you can do this because Mark did this. You can do this because Perry did this. Now you won't get to meet Perry if we don't do this, but you can get Perry's trading card. You can read about Perry and you can say, hey, I want to be like this dude here. You know, that's what's important, and that's what our community it we miss out on so much
Man.
with that, right? If you can
Yeah.
see all these, like in other communities, they see scientists, they see
Right.
business owners,
Right.
entrepreneurs. It's everywhere. It's in the movies, right? It's on billboards. In our community, it's athletes, and then there's entertainment, and there's
But we
so
don't
many
really see
kids.
them. I would say we don't really
We
see
don't,
them. We know
that's very true. We actually don't see them, right? But that's the only thing we're familiar with,
Right.
them. Right.
right? And
Right.
so if I'm not an athletic person, which is most people are can't play professional basketball and football, like that's unrealistic, right? These are extreme athletes. These are extreme people when it comes to athleticism, right? Because you got to be able to calm yourself down. Some sports you got to have the size. You got to. There's so much that goes with that. When we're talking about computer programmers, when we're talking about just scientists, people who can do some amazing things to help society move forward, we're not we just don't introduce our youth to a lot of these career paths. And so this is what Brandon and I are trying to figure out. How do we introduce them to you, right? How do I tell them who Perry is? In what way
Yeah.
can I tell them, okay, this is who Perry is and this is what you can do?
Right. No, I think this is very innovative. You guys really give me a food for thought here. Because one of the things you talk about my career now. So one of the things that you know I think is most significant wasn't really working at NASA. It was how I got there,
Mm.
and that was I tried like everything. I was working at IBM at the time.
That's still big
IBM
time, bro.
wasn't.
It's
Big
big time,
time.
yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I was trying to get there. I mean, and again, I'm just a young guy. You're right. I'm at IBM. I want to be at NASA,
Right.
you know, and couldn't. There was no way that IBM was going to let me transfer. It was like it was two different entities, and they didn't talk. They shared a name, but they didn't talk. And I called the college professor who had worked at NASA and told him what I wanted to do. And he said, well, okay, well, let me see what I can do to help. And I got a call from the president of a small NASA subcontractor. And he called and asked me to come down and talk to him. And we met and we talked and had lunch and everything. And I'm thinking I'm interviewing. And so the guy, by the time I get ready to go, he's like, well, okay, so when are you coming back? I mean, we're going to do this in 2 weeks or do you need a little longer? And I'm like, what? Because if you interview and your mind is totally somewhere else.
Right.
And the guy says, he's like, well, I thought you were interested in this. Do you like it here? And I'm like, yeah, I like it. And he's asking me, do you like it here?
Right.
And so I'm saying, yeah. I said, well, I got the job. He said, you had the job when James called me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've tried to pay that forward in so many ways, and in some ways exactly like that.
Right, right.
And I've had opportunities to get someone in on my name. And the problem is I don't know. And so what you guys are doing, I think is very innovative because it's one of the things I was trying to do. There's a lot of Black IT professionals out here. We don't know each other.
Right.
We see each other in passing. And yet we are probably managing, developing, supporting more than, I would say, $500 million worth of goods and services here in Fort Lauderdale.
Wow.
But we own less than 1% of the companies
Right.
that are getting that $500
Right.
million. So how do we do that? How can we begin to look at, because we do a lot of great things, but how do we begin to start building this? I mean, because if I'm getting asked questions, I want young men like you that I can just kind of go, hey, here it is.
Right, right. Well, for me, I know one of my things, and Brandon and I talk about this a lot. I think it starts with literacy, right? So I can't own a company if I don't know anything about owning a company, right? You have to be prepared to be in certain situations.
Exactly.
And a lot of that, when you're literate, you look at situations completely different, right? You're processing that information. You're not as confrontational because, something could be said one way, but you're going to process the information a little differently. You're not looking at like, well, why did he say it like that? No, I can get it. I understand that. It's business. I think it all starts with preparing the youth to own. They have to be prepared to own. You can't just say, oh, well, they need to own this company. They'll run it into the ground because they don't know how to spend money. They don't know how to save money. They don't know anything about taxes. And so if we don't prepare them, they'll never be prepared to do that.
I totally agree. And that's one of the issues that we see or have seen with the exodus of Black business from old to transferring to new family members. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that look in Beaumont, Chris?
I mean, again, I live in the oldest Black neighborhood Beaumont has to offer. I remember individuals telling me that, they could only go to particular areas of the city. And majority of the Blacks that live here weren't allowed to go to, other Black affluent neighborhoods. I don't know. That was, before my time. But I knew that the businesses that were here were said to have been, family owned, deep rooted, community served, institutions, that kind of business. Not just somebody, making money off of a good or a service that's provided. This was, a community that money turned in it over and over and over and over again before they actually could allow it, not just allow it, but could allow it to leave their community. So the monies that the wealth that they created uh, within themselves, within their families, um, it was there. But like you said, um, it wasn't. They weren't astute to maintain that business, make sure the taxes are correct, make sure you're hiring the right individuals, making sure your orders and your inventory is in on point. So it's a lot of things that information that, like he said, I'm not gonna be able to get from you, big bruh, if you pass and refuse to give it to me, and or didn't choose to give it to me. You chose to hold it to yourself, and I find that a lot in my community, especially in Beaumont, where our elders allegedly aren't giving us information. They're not sharing it. They're not pointing us in the direction to get it, and it makes it seem almost selfish, um, or or intentional, especially when you see us heading down a destructive path, and you fail to give not just one individual you see going down that destructive path, but expose it to all of us. And not just expose it to all of us, let us know that there's consequences and repercussions to adhering and not adhering. And a lot of those disciplines, self-disciplines, are missing within in Beaumont. So like, when it comes to economic development, when it comes to financial literacy, when it comes to literacy, you know, shit, Big Brother, like, this is known to be nationally known to be the dumbest metro in the nation.
Yeah. Beaumont was ranked
So,
uh, the most illiterate city. Now, Chris says all of that, but gonna bring Chris is also head of a neighborhood association,
Mm.
and the neighborhood that he is head of sits directly across from Exxon Mobil.
Mm.
actually, they're my neighbor.
Wow.
They're his neighbor.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, tell them what you decided to do with that big resource right there in your neighborhood that no one was ever using.
um,
ExxonMobil has been in Beaumont for
for
years.
years. Well, I mean, like, I will say the Charlton Pilot Neighborhood Association, previous to my administration, which is now the Charlton Pilot Historical Neighborhood Association, um, has been, in partnership with ExxonMobil for a long time.
Wow.
From whenever I moved to Beaumont, I remember um, where ExxonMobil and this neighborhood would collaborate with different services, community events that was citywide, participated. So I mean, like, the partnership and the relationship, I knew had to go beyond just yeah, um, this is we got a money funnel, and no
Right.
disrespect to any corporation that finds a neighborhood association, and especially a fence line neighborhood, and they find a nonprofit organization that they can funnel money through. Well, I saw that, and not just, again, not just to my neighbor ExxonMobil, but several others in the industries that are around me, like the Port of Beaumont. And I'm in a horseshoe. That's what my brother didn't tell you. My neighbors sit like this, and our industrial neighbors sit around us. So, and so does the river. So you have Jefferson County Courthouse, you have the Port of Beaumont, you have Lower Nature's Valley Authority, you have Lewis Dreyfus, you have Arkema, you have Martin, you have Energy, you have, he mentioned ExxonMobil, um, and there's some other entities that's probably across the on the other side of the river. So, but what I did was instead of trying to deface these entities, and try to beat them across the back for their services that they provide, not just here in Beaumont, Texas, or the state of Texas, but globally. I accentuate the history to our industry neighbors. of this neighborhood that I'm blessed to live in, as well as to administer as president. Um, a lot of the things that we did what was come to the table, develop greater relations with the Port of Beaumont. Not only the entities and uh, just sitting at the table, but we try to provide them with plans and ways that of where we as the neighborhood association would like to see ourselves, especially
Right.
progressively and elevating ourselves into the future. So like there's like a lot of different partnerships and a lot of different
Yeah.
affiliations that come with having relations or relationships with those entities. I've been able to plug in with the financial sector of the city, the Chamber of Commerce, all of the labor unions and
Right.
industry unions and the universities and LIT. So I'm sort of kind of plugged into everything that's going on in the city of Beaumont progressively. And I'm trying to expose it as much as I possibly can to the residents that live here and
Right.
abroad. So that's
Yeah.
the majority of what I've been doing um, here lately. But we're about to undergo um, a reconstruct of ourselves. And I like the way you guys mentioned about your nonprofit and your for-profit arm. Um, Again, a lot of people that would blow over people's head, especially if they don't understand how to work those two. It's like the reins of a horse. You know what I'm saying? You want to do this, you gotta. So you definitely have to have those two uh, types of entities where they
Yeah.
correspond with each other. So I understand why an individual invested a nonprofit portion to you. So I'm ecstatic about that for you
Yeah.
guys. Um, but that's the
So
same thing that I'm expecting is the my industry to pour into us and to the nonprofit organizations that we have within our area, like uh, South. It's called SE4L. It's South End for Life. There is the um, It Takes a Village Beaumont.
Mm.
That's in my
right.
area. Uh,
So
there's
how does that work?
um,
How does the
well,
how does the take? What is that about?
well, with those entities, like I said, I'll be able to. We're undergoing the reconstruct of the nonprofit status for the or not for the neighborhood association. So we're going from
Right.
501c3 to 501c4. And being that we are going to be engaging in political negotiations when it comes to city hall or city council,
Right.
we would have to have ourselves in that type of capacity. So uh,
So what
in
is but not to that, but in terms of Exxon and in terms of the labor, I mean, are you guys
well,
doing anything
right,
innovative?
and that's what I'm getting to. Like with that, I'm able to like I said, you're not just going to be a money funnel. You're going to provide services. You're going to provide information. You're going to provide resources, and that's what they have actually started doing. They're reaching out to individuals that live within the area so that they can catch them and bring them to LIT and have them
Right.
certified.
And LIT,
Yeah,
LIT
right.
is the
Lamar
Lamar
Institute of
Institute
Technology.
of Technology.
Right.
Great.
And they're bringing them there to get their certifications. And a lot of these programs and organizations that are affiliated with Lamar Institute of Technology provide these certificates, the process to earn your certificate for free.
Right.
Um, there's also scholarship
But
opportunity.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Let's move on to because I want to get to the political arm of
Okay.
this, and so um, Brandon, I know Brandon and I've engaged in some pretty uh, nice debates. uh, uh, again, coming out of this post-COVID, and now everybody's waiting on these $1,400 checks, and but also also in this 1.9 trillion is opportunities for some new jobs. Um, what are some of the issues that you see coming out of COVID that you guys see uh, our communities, even though we know Biden and Harris is in the White House, what does that mean for our communities
Well,
from your perspective?
well, I know for one thing, we have a lot of students missing from school,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it's globally, it's 168 million kids that are not in school through this pandemic. So coming out of that, they're going to be far behind where they need to be, and depending on the community or school they were in, they may have already been behind, right? And
Right.
so this is going to get them further and further behind, and so this going to have a huge effect on the workforce, and just there's going to be a lot of problems coming out of that. I mean, with lack of education comes crime too,
Right.
Right.
right? And so we're going to have a lot of issues from this, just on
Yeah.
that from the education standpoint. Now
Yeah.
I'll let Brandon go on to because he might have posted about this on Facebook as well.
Um, so there's so many ways to address this. Perry, ask the question again so I don't fall
Well,
into
and I was sort of leading this because
yeah. Lead me
and
to where
Brandon,
you want me to go.
I'd like for you to tell, because Brandon during COVID has been at the forefront of teaching and educating those who are, I guess, in the black professionals, um, how to invest. And it was, I mean, from I noticed in June of last year just how the conversation changed around some people, because as they began to talk about investment. So, Brandon, now we're looking at this. What do you think is
I think
is is the best play coming out of this financially?
best play financially coming out of this. I think that you have to be in things that are forward thinking, because that's what that conversation has been about, right? So stuff in AI, stuff having to do with the fact that it hasn't happened yet, but it's coming in terms of clean energy as it relates to transportation. So not only
Mhm.
just talking about our actual personal transportation, but public transportation as well. So we might start getting in things like hydrogen running cars. That's something that's been looked at, and so these charging stations that Biden's talked about,
Yeah.
those are electric plays. You know what I'm saying? Find the companies that create the components. You know, and so I see a lot of people, paying attention to some of the larger names and stuff like that. But I think that if we keep our eyes on the things that will be the new economy, right? Something that Trump had restricted, wasn't really interested in, as it related to, being on that side of the fence in terms of being a Republican and not really having an eye on anything having to do with clean energy, whether it be just for our own consumption of air or food, but the greater economy at large as it relates to other things, like I just said, like with transportation, which is a huge thing. Um, I think Biden and Harris is enough of what we need right now. It's a lot better than Trump. It's not Andrew Yang, which would be a lot better. It's not necessarily Pete Buttigieg or Bernie Sanders, but it's a lot better than what we were dealing with. So from an investment standpoint, I think the plays that seem to be risky or seem to be too far out, the safe plays are in AI and in the clean energy.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you
And
think about the
marijuana as well.
cruise?
Yeah, I was gonna say
Marijuana for sure. Yeah, marijuana.
Marijuana for definite.
We're seeing big
Yeah.
plays now in precious metals, and I just read an article today about them still in catalytic converters because you need the palladium in them. You know, and precious metals, I think, you know, is going to be a really big play.
Yeah, and it crazy. America got out of the rare mineral industry. We had the one refining plant. Well,
Right.
the one refining plant that is based here in America is Chinese owned.
Mm.
And so, as you begin to look at rare minerals and all that's going on, I mean, that's what the wars in Angola and you hear Boko Haram. No, that's about getting titanium and the other rare minerals to make the new what is it? iPhone
Right.
21.
The cobalt, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cobalt, lithium for batteries. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah.
need lithium, especially with all the
Uh,
electric cars that they're talking
right.
about building. You're going to need
Right.
lithium,
Right.
Yeah.
right? And I don't
So
think that
so so are we in those industries?
I mean,
we
I
are.
believe.
I
I
mean, I
believe
was about to say,
that.
outside of us four.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
we're
I believe that as a question you asked earlier, Perry, about you know, how do these things change? How do we go to like doing something about some of these things? And Ramon brought up, you know, the foundation of what we do, which is literacy. I think that conversation is happening. And because
Right.
that conversation is happening, people are at least attempting because there's some understanding.
Right.
And what you know was a true catalyst was the pandemic. People were trying to find stuff to do,
Right.
didn't know what to
Right.
do.
Ways to make
People were
money.
being told that, you know, catastrophe and down markets are the best time to play. So people was
Yeah.
like, all right, I guess, sure, you know, and that's kind of what I've seen a lot of. But uh, even though that was the catalyst and the thing that got a lot of this started, I mean, I started to see a lot of people educating themselves, listening to people that were educated. So they
Yeah.
jumped in, not really knowing what they were doing, but through like just anecdotal evidence from what I've been seeing, and then seeing some of the things that have happened. Um, some of the smaller retail investors moving and quote unquote manipulating markets that have been manipulated for years by the bigger fish lets me know
Yeah.
that, you know, the investments happening on Robinhood and Webull and smaller apps, these people are a lot more sophisticated than people have been giving them credit for, you know. And so when
Right.
you ask the question, are we in those industries and sectors? If you look at the traditional Robinhood trader, those are the things that they're going after because a lot of those guys are a lot younger and they're understanding that those are the spaces and places that the new economy is going. So a lot of investments are going in those sectors.
So the whole thing with GameStop was that to get back at
Yeah, that
big
was a
hedge
targeted.
funds.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
targeted. That was absolutely
Yeah.
targeted. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Do you
because you
think there's
see
going to be
outlets.
more?
Do I don't know. I don't know if the government's going to continue to allow. You see, they kind of put the brakes
no, they're not.
on what happened, you know. But
Yeah,
I
no,
think the fact that you, at the end of the day, you can't stop supply and demand. So I don't know if you could be that targeted, but I think that you can still have minor manipulation happen just on
sure.
going up and down. I don't think you can go straight at a hedge fund
Right.
like that
Right. Right.
again and kind of cripple their position. But I do believe that there'll still be pockets of what they would call pump and dumps happening because you have just like how you have places on the internet that create QAnon conspiracies, you have places on the internet now creating small communities saying this is how we're going to invest, and that's what happened, and that's what's
Right.
happening, and you
Yeah.
can't stop
But
it.
Yeah.
but the government showed us just how rigged it is when they stopped the trading and
Oh
said
yeah, absolutely. Because
we
when
are
Yeah.
they're
going
making
to
all the
make
money,
sure that
when they're
they
making all the money, it's all good.
right.
Yeah.
But they made them whole, so they didn't really even really lose. You know, the fact that they would
Yeah.
do that lets you know. You know,
Right.
you can't really you can't you can't make that happen. The government's
Yeah.
going to
No.
guarantee their
Not in
money.
the way in which you want it to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can start the tidal wave, but believe I have a machine to stop it.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
they're saying.
no, I think there will be more instances, and not to get too technical on it, but I remember seeing on 60 Minutes.
Okay.
It was crazy. This crazy story about how companies were trying to get in the stock exchange. Companies were trying to buy position to get as close to the ticker as they could, because everyone had the same network cables, and so so if you understand how data travels, I mean, the further out it goes, and so someone had found a much larger cable, and so you had this. But one of the things that they said was they were finding out that because of the data speed and the proximity to certain companies, that if you were in a company in the back and you put in a sale, your sale could have decreased exponentially just in those few seconds, because you had other traders who were either yeah, and they were hitting the ticker faster, and they were saying that on an average, a stock price from the time you hit the enter button could potentially change up to 100 times. I mean, we're talking pennies,
Right.
but that stock, but
Depending on how much,
what you
depending
bought
on your
at,
position.
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think now with some of these new guys, now that they understand technology better, because I think that's the one key play that we're dealing with in our politics and everywhere else, is all of the power players have old minds and they think old ways. And you have the Robin Hoods who are out here who are understanding new technology. That's why you get, I mean, you see the thing with Parler and everything with the insurrection. It's because now, I mean, by the time you see it, it's already there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now
react.
they're calling, so now we're calling this living in 0 day.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how to circumvent it, then by the time you see it, you got 0 days to fix it. Now you got to go back and patch.
Yeah, I
And
honestly
so
think they're going to come up with something to prevent some of this type of trading. And we've seen it before. The government's going to come in. Some of this stuff is not going to be allowed. It's not going to be considered legal. That's the only way they can stop some of it. And I think it's coming.
Yeah. Well, we got a few more minutes before we go, and we're gonna do before we go. Want to get some closing thoughts on, I guess, some of the things that you guys have planned coming out in the next few weeks, and really, how can we begin to even use this new technology? And I wanted to bring you guys, like, I'll be very honest, wanted Chris to hear you guys, because what you guys are doing there definitely needs to be transplanted in some ways. I mean, we've got a city with a rich history, and I think it just takes
Bring it.
learning, and so how do we begin to do that? But
Yes,
I'll put that's my want. But again,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that Ramon, that I mean, if you had a chance to say, well, what would I like to get done in the next 6 months here in Broward, what would that be?
In Broward or Beaumont?
In Broward, or just for you?
Because I mean, as he was talking, I'm like, that's dope what you're doing, right? So you're doing some really, really dope, innovative things as well. And and for me, it's like, my mind starts going, well, how do we connect with that, right? How do we connect? And it's a way of networking, right? We're on social media. Social media for me is straight networking. I mean, you have people all over the world at your fingertips. You can make some amazing things happen. I think in the next 6 months, we have a lot of things planned. Where it's going to be, I mean, I plan stuff and it ends up way bigger. I'm sure Brandon, it feels the same way. We will sit down and plan on something, and then it's like so and so comes to us, and it's way bigger than what we planned for. We're doing something we didn't think we'd be doing, and so it's hard to say. I don't even plan it out like that anymore in my
Yeah.
mind. We just kind of talk about it and get things together. So what we're working on is we're definitely doing right now. We've been working on the women's history trading cards. And so
Okay.
that's right on our plate right in this moment. And we also just finished up the first issue of a magazine that we connected with Community Education Alliance called Grace Magazine. And so we just completed
Okay.
that. And so now we have this magazine and the trading cards as well as the comic books and children's books, and kind of piecing things together because we're looking at it like, we need that. Once again, we need to make sure the media serves us, right? And the
Right.
only way that we can do that is by creating the media. We have to be our own
Right.
source.
Right.
And so we just finished Grace Magazine, so that's something we'll be pushing out there. We'll be working on some distribution with that. Um, but yeah, we're focused on the magazine and the trading cards right now in women's history, making sure that we are serving the community and giving our youth all the information that we can possibly give them.
Yeah.
And that's some of the the tangible portions of what it is that we intend to put out in the next 6 months. A really big thing that happened last year that's coming into fruition now. That's going to have to take place probably in the next few weeks or so. So that'll be within 6 months. Is the fact that we got a grant from the National Football League to and that kind of stems from the work of Colin Kaepernick that turned into the work that Malcolm Jenkins and Anquan Bolden, the money
Right.
that they received from the NFL, I think it was $87 billion, a million, however much it was. They started creating grants for social justice. So we teamed up with somebody to start to have those conversations as well. So we'll be adding, the social
Right.
justice education component rather than just doing the social justice work that Perry that we've been doing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so that's another thing that we look to get done. The work that we'll be doing is anticipated to be published by the University of Clemson, the findings, because we're going to be doing some
Wow.
data
Yeah.
with how kids feel about their interactions with local law enforcement, and then once we finish, has any of that changed? Do they
Right.
anticipate being more involved, being more or less hostile with those encounters and things of that nature? So that's something we look forward to as well.
Okay.
That's awesome, man. I applaud you guys, man. I'm
Thanks,
actually,
brother.
big bro, I'm actually getting ready to um, embark on a community garden proposal with
Ooh.
the city of Beaumont. I'm actually in the process of trying to alleviate the food desert that we live in. And not that it's a complete food desert, because Service Food Store is the best meat market. Correction, the best non-GMO meat market in all of Southeast Texas. Yeah, and it's down the
Mm.
street on Doucette Street.
Wow. Yeah.
um,
It's in the hood.
yeah,
Yeah.
I gotta get that plug in there. But they don't have groceries there anymore. So like perishable groceries, I definitely would like to have those um, back into our store, back into our community. So not only are we doing the community garden, we'll do a component uh, where it would include like a farmers and crafts market. Uh, we'll be able to sell what we grow, as well as network with the neighbors. And if there's a grapefruit tree, or my neighbor may do limes or something of that nature, or um, Miss Mary may do wreaths for particular birthdays, and she don't have a place to or a venue that will take her on. Well, our farmers and crafts market will be able to be that platform for all types of
Yeah.
generations,
Yeah.
and
Just to do
all type of
co-op. Right.
genres, right? um, and like I said, we're hopefully going to be completing our new nonprofit status here soon, so that we could definitely engage with our local politics here in Beaumont and politicians, so that we could become a more educated electorate, so we could influence legislation that benefits us,
Right.
and not just some writ that that's basically moves you as the diaspora out of the way because it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I definitely would like to, within the next 6 months, link up with these two gentlemen right
Most
here.
I'll
definitely.
make sure. I'll make sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
And I guess, guys, that I gotta. I that's what Ramon and I love getting together because I love talking to someone with big ideas. Um, and for me, my big idea is we've got to find a better way of um, of capturing our work in this I won't say digital, but in this data age. Um, and the reason why I say that is because we've caught police incident after police incident with cell phones. But if I ask any one of you how many police incidents have there been, we don't know. And that's because not numbers are that important.
Right.
Um, I'm working with a client now that is trying to pinpoint the price of every asset that they sell. And that's a tedious process because on one side you got the salespeople saying I sold this, and you got finance people saying, okay, here's the money. Well, how do we line that up such that we know really to the penny how much our creativity costs? And they know they're going to give some away, and they know they're going to do some promos on this, but to the penny for every asset.
So
It is one
I'm
of the
not. I'm not.
most.
I'm not sure I'm following.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so on our creativity, I don't understand how that will work.
Well, on our creativity and what we do in our communities. I mean, we know the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we know what goes on in our community,
Mm-hmm.
but we've not created a mechanism by which we know what's going on. Whenever we ask about police incidents, we have
Mm-hmm.
to go to police to ask them about how many incidents that they record in our community.
Right.
You know, we're there to record the incident if something happens, but we've got to do in this new data age. Here's what I'm saying: if you're not counting, then you're being counted.
Correct.
And we've developed this idea of being so much users and being app driven that we've not learned how to be more of a collector of our work and what we do. And I'm not saying that in terms of what you guys, and trying to put a value on your effort, but I'm saying for our kids to get a better appreciation of their community and the things that are happening, it can't just be this gut feeling. I see that they need to change it. How many incidents of this is happening in our community? How do we begin to do that collector of the infringement on our community? Whether it's police, whether it's whether it's
Us.
well, no, I'll do this. Uh, I know we say that. I know the county has an a count of the number of houses in its inventory, but I mean, are we keeping track of how our neighborhoods began to depreciate
Hmm.
and begin to collect that data so that we know, rather than just going in and going, well, you know, they closed up the Brooks Brothers store over here or whatever.
Right.
We're not keeping accurate tabulation. We've got to do a better job of tracking that. We do it, as I say, just by taking pictures, but pictures are not numbers.
Right.
And we got to quantify that, because we've seen that right now, that even with a picture, you're not going to get justice, even if the picture says otherwise. So how do we
Right.
begin to quantify numbers? Because people begin to look at numbers eventually. I don't know. We got over 500,000 people, you know, who died from COVID, and the last administration really didn't care about it. So, you know, uh, but I'm just saying, going forward, as we live in this day to age, we really need to begin to uh, look at new ways of how we collect and use data for our benefit, and not just do the digital and the
I'll tell you
media
one way
side.
to start is by educating people.
Yeah,
Boy,
it
you said a
is.
lot there, man. I mean, just think about how many people would be able to process what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you
Well,
got a few. I mean, we've had conversations before, but like I'm reading up on some of this stuff, right? And so I'm still not up to date on a lot of what you're saying. So how would anybody even know what it is that you're talking about,
yeah,
if we don't figure out a way to
Yeah.
to
To convey it.
yeah, we got to make
right,
this as simple as possible, and then scale up to this.
Right. Right. Right.
right. Yeah. No, I agree. It's because as we talk about artificial intelligence and we talk about these things, they sound very benign, but underneath them, you're giving up so much more. I mean,
Right.
artificial intelligence is machine learning. Machine learning is, well, I'm giving you all of my data so that you can use it against me, even
Right.
even though I don't know I'm giving you my data.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not telling you how I think. And again, that's what I say. It all goes back to that whole thing about getting back to normal, and so we have patterns, and if people know your patterns.
I think you should do a children's book about.
We need to do that. Yeah. We need to prepare our children for this. I mean,
No,
because
but
they're going to a very digital world.
the reason I say that is because a lot of times we look at a children's book like, oh, that's just for kids. But I found a lot of adults reaching out to us because it's so simple they can understand it now. If, I wouldn't have been able to get it to this point if you didn't break it down to me. You know,
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
start with multiplication. I have to start with addition and subtraction.
Right.
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 And so if I've never heard that before, it's new to me. You
Right.
cannot
Yeah.
start me off with machine learning. Like, what?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, well, how you're inputting data, right? Okay. How I'm putting my information in there, right? Well, how do I protect myself? There's conversations we can have before we get to that point, because you're so educated when it comes to that, and you spent so many years in this field. A lot of it is common. It's almost like common sense to you,
Right.
right?
Right.
Listen, 99%.
I know
you
it's.
said some stuff to me. I was like, Perry, I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey Perry, I got a quick question, and I know we're wrapping. I'm just trying to, as Ramon was saying, trying to educate myself on things
Mhm.
that have to do with artificial intelligence. Would we consider something is I guess benign, or is commonly talked about as an algorithm as artificial intelligence?
Mhm. Yes, and what we're seeing taking place even now, and again, it's taking place in a small sector, and that's about, algorithms are really nothing more than a set of instructions. That's what it is. Uh, and now we're moving toward this artificial intelligence, and now we're interacting with machines, but there's an implicit bias going in. Everyone's going, well, a machine can't be biased.
Yes.
It can, if the programmer is biased. I mean, you know, you know, and so now when it becomes this thing about, well, you can't say, well, the bank is redlining this community if we're all just pushing information through a terminal and it takes our information to tell us, well, you've been rejected. What, you've got some systemic racism built in without the person there.
Right.
And part of that has to deal with the fact that there are not as many developers and people involved in that IT industry to help develop that. I mean, there's no way you're gonna give me a code and I'm going, oh hell no, man! I see y'all finna jack us up over here. No, but if you know, I mean, and you know, now they're looking at this whole thing with biometrics, which is really, you know, racially developed, because when they do those test patterns, they aren't using very many blacks and they aren't using very many black women. And one of the things that they found out with the implicit bias in facial recognition is a lot of women end up, because there are so few black women, a lot of black women, when they see them, they identify them as men of other origins. And one of the ethical researchers at Google, a sister, was fired over it, and it has become one of the biggest debates going on.
Wow.
Within this tech space. You know, and so yeah, we've got a lot, because what we don't have is a platform.
Right.
We have apps. We have apps. If we develop something, we're gonna develop something for a platform that already exists.
Right.
So how do we now begin to take this, you know, thing to say, well, how do we develop an infrastructure for us that teaches and instructs us in the way that we want, such that we don't have to deal with the platform?
I think you're gonna have to teach and instruct, brother.
That's right. Big goals, but that's what I'm saying. That's why I enjoy you guys, because that, I mean, those are big goals that we need to.
I think we should work on something. I think we should work on something around that's, one, relatable, and two is the basics of it, right? How do we get into the basics of it so we can later have this discussion, because we've broken it down to you, and we can discuss let's say the story. You know, this young black girl has, you know, an issue, and she's learning the code, and coding gets her out of the trouble, right?
Yeah.
If we start at that and we start talking about this conversation, that conversation obviously is going to lead into coding, right?
Yeah.
I think we have to start with a story and something our youth can relate to, and process that information and begin turning that into something, because we'll never get to the point that you're saying if we're never educated. Right? You can't even support me because you don't know what I'm talking about, right? What I'm saying is so foreign, you can't support anything that I'm doing. That happens too. That's a reality for a lot of us.
Yeah, that is.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so I think we have to take it from being foreign, introduce it to them, and teach it in a way that they get it and they can speak that language, because that's a different language too.
Yeah.
Yes,
no,
indeed,
but therein lies how we better police our neighborhoods. Better informs us on how we should invest our money.
Right.
I mean, when we do the developing, I mean that's one of the whole things about this whole IT industry. I mean, you know, everyone loves a nifty looking gadget, and you know, won't ask any questions about it, and we'll click the OK button. It says terms of agreement. You wouldn't sign a contract without reading it, but we do it every day. When they give it to us on a computer screen, as long as they give you an OK button, you looking for OK, you not reading.
Yeah, but we've been conditioned to do that. How many little kids get their parents' phone and they know to hit OK as soon as it pops up,
right?
And so it becomes a habit that I never read that. You know, I just hit OK, and that's part of the process. But
Yeah.
until you teach them different, they don't know any different.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've got to just be better. We've got to be better stewards in this
Educators.
new
Yeah.
Yeah. I
in
mean,
this new
it's
world.
totally on
Yeah.
us. If you can see the problem, then you can create the change, right? It's
Yeah.
at this point, it's on us. All of us that see what's going on, if we're not acting on it and actually trying to create that change, we are part of that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, there are people that are 70, 80 years old. They don't know half of what you're talking about, Perry. I mean,
Right.
you know, I mean, that's deep where you're going with it, you know, and
Yeah.
so we have to break it down. You know, that's my first thing is how do I
Yeah.
break this down so I can understand this? I don't need that to be that deep because if I'm going to tell it to my daughter, she won't get what you just said. Right?
And again, you know what? She just may, and that's why we really have to begin to get it down in that layer. They may not understand all the nuances about it, but I think they understand it because they interact with it much differently than we did. And I
Right.
see that, I grew up when PCs first came out. I see you guys working with mobile phones. I'm not a big mobile phone fan.
But there's
I
a
use it
difference
for
too.
what it is. Yeah.
But there's a difference because some of us are using it. You have an understanding of how it operates. That's way different.
And that's the problem. And that's
Right.
what I'm saying. That's what we have to fix because when we were coming in, we were so excited about building it.
Right.
We didn't do the teaching, and now we got this. Right. We got this gluttony for giving me new stuff. And if you guys are not careful, you're going to be my age. You're going to be looking at your kids going, damn it, you didn't learn it.
Right.
Well, we didn't teach it. And that's what we got to start doing.
Don't you think that disconnect is with most areas? I mean, even with civil rights, there's a huge disconnect between this generation and the previous generations because some things are not taught. It's almost like you're in the struggle, so you're struggling to do it. You're not thinking about teaching it. I'm trying to do this, you know, and there's such a huge difference between the two, teaching it and actually doing it. I think we lose a lot of people in that, you know. You're trying to reach the youth, and it's like we missed a whole generation of teaching them anything like that because you had to do it in order to be able to tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to. So we're trying. I think our thing is being that middleman. How do we go to Perry, get this information, and then give it to them, and bring everybody together?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what has to happen on many different levels. Whether we're talking about civil rights or we're talking about machine learning, we have to bring this together. We have to bridge that gap, and I think that's the only way we're going to really see some change. We're going to have the issues we're talking about today. We talked about them 30 years ago.
Right.
This isn't new. A lot of these issues, man, we've had a lot of these issues for way too long where we have not bridged the gap and began teaching, okay, this is how this works, and kind of slowly pulling them in to this information, right? Pulling them into this information and exposing them to things they haven't seen. A lot of times we honestly just blame it on each other, or, you know, that's just where it is and they don't know this. And I mean, we've seen and heard everything.
Right.
And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to blame anybody. I'll take the blame. If somebody got to take the blame, I'll take the blame.
Right.
But Brandon and I are going to fix it. That's literally how I see it. You know, I'll take the blame. We'll fix it, seeing how, because it's man, they've created so much destruction in our community. You have the poisoning of our water. You have the poisoning of the paint. You have the poisoning of the mind. You have the poisoning of the community. I mean, you have so many different problems that we have to address. It almost seems insurmountable, but we have to find a way. How do we connect that? Because for me, what you're talking about, Perry, is actually the poisoning of the mind.
Yep.
Right. And so when we address that, then we can stop you from poisoning your body. Right. As we're educating you slowly to these things, but it's deep, brother. Where you're coming from is extremely deep.
Yeah. No, I mean, but it's just like the incident and man, so glad you're feeling better, Brandon. But it's just like the incident of us finding out sort of after the fact that when the COVID vaccine came out, that it really wasn't hitting our community, even though it was available. And our community wanted it. It wasn't that our community didn't
Right.
want it. We didn't even have access to it. And so I look, there's a vaccine place on 441 and Sunrise. If there's no blacker community, then right there on the corner of Sunrise and 441.
Right.
And you looked at there and you looked in the line and it was Mercedes, it was Bentleys, it was Jags, it was Maseratis, it was Quebec, Canada license plates in New York. And so I'm saying, but what about Mama Joe on 16th Street? No, she didn't get it. Those are the kinds of things, and not to put, and I'm not going to call the group's name, but there was a group out there helping to manage a black organization. And I'm going, you guys weren't kind of checking this off and saying, hey, something. Those are the kinds of things. I mean, we can't just see it. I mean, we've got to, we've got to find better mechanisms to understand and calibrate those sorts of things in our community, because we've been too accustomed to seeing the disenfranchisement. So it's like Pavlov's dog. When we see disenfranchisement, we do the same bark. And we've got to start doing some better. We've got to change it, if we're going to get past it. But man, great. I see the time we've gone way over. But man, it was just great kind of talking to you guys, man. Absolutely. And I definitely want to do it again. And I didn't even get a chance to talk about how you guys were doing or Brandon was doing the online sales market, the new version of QVC channel.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that on another episode.
But I think that was innovative, man. I love that.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Queen of Fenor and the team at Hip Studios, asking them, Ramon and I, to come on board to come up with something again that's going to be needed in a new world after COVID. Our own platform, because I've never seen anything on QVC or HSN for me, so right. We were creating that thing right here in Broward County, and it still exists. Season 2 is coming soon, and it's just a platform for urban consumers to be able to feel appreciated and have products that resonate with them. So that's definitely something that we'll be talking about.
We'll talk about that. Okay, great. Well, all right. Well, man, thank you guys. And audience, thank you for sticking with us. I know this was much different than our previous shows, but this was just one of those kickback shows, just to hear from some different voices and some young voices. Because again, I'm in a different generation. And so I'm looking at things a whole lot differently, and I'm trying to make sure that things are in a much better place than when I got here, and I'm leaving it better. And at the same time, I don't want you guys to have to go through some of the same, as the old people say, the rigmarole. I want you guys to go through some of those same rigmarole.
Well, we appreciate
it. And but if you would like to be on a future episode of the 2-Minute Warning, you can text us at 954-605-8107 for more info. We want to hear some new voices. I'm have nothing against the old voices. I've heard them enough. I want to hear some new voices. I want to think some new things. I want to hear some stuff I've never even thought about.
And we want to hear some. We want to revamp y'all mind so that it takes. You know what I'm saying? Because like y'all have that information, y'all have like a roadmap that we don't. You know.
Right.
And if like he said, if I could be the middleman for my future, yeah, I need y'all. I need y'all old people to like throw up all the information y'all got and just put it in a bottle and send it to me, so we could, go through it and be like, nah, you tweak that a little bit, Grandma. See how that work? That
Right.
kind of
So, well, we will continue to do this. This just wasn't to fill some time on a Thursday night. I do things with intention, and as I said, um, I'm growing, and I'm always looking back to see how I can give back, and definitely want to see how we can definitely connect this bridge between this
Absolutely.
east coast of Florida and this Gulf Coast of Texas.
Big money, Texas, baby.
All right then. Thank you guys. Love you so much.
Thank you. Perry, we thank you so much for the support, bro.
Yeah. All right, man. Good night.
All right.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Nice meeting you, Chris.